In the opening scenes, we see a sheriff walking along the streets of a certain town, ringing a bell to alert all the residents that it's time to go home. Each of the inhabitants, before nightfall, hurries to lock their doors and windows as quickly as possible. On the wall of each house and establishment, next to the door, hangs a special talisman that prevents malevolent entities from entering inside. A girl named Megan wanted to play outside a little longer, but her mother, as well as the sheriff who was just walking by at that moment, told her that it's not safe to stay outside after sunset. Even in this small town, there's a hospital of its own. Kenny Lou, the sheriff's assistant, played chess with his father who suffered from dementia, but with the onset of sunset, all patients must hide in the basement. Kenny thanks Dr. Christie for everything she does for his father. Kenny is bitter about realizing that his father won't recover. After Kenny left, Christie locked the doors and checked if the talisman was in its place. Meanwhile, Sheriff Boyd Stevens ensures that everyone disperses to their homes. Kenny approaches him, saying that everything is quiet for now. After making sure that nothing unusual is happening, Boyd heads to his headquarters in the former post office building. 96 nights have passed without incidents. Frank as usual got drunk and was unable to go home, so he stayed at a friend's place. Lauren still hopes that her husband Frank will return. Megan also worries about her father, who was supposed to come back before darkness. Before bed, Megan prayed while the mother was covering the windows. Suddenly there was a knock. After that, Megan allegedly heard her grandmother's voice, asking her to come to the window. Megan knows that it's forbidden, but the grandmother said it would be their secret. Lauren has no idea that something terrible is about to happen. In that moment, Megan opened the shutter and saw the grandmother in front of her, telling her how much she has missed her. When Lauren noticed her daughter at the window, it was already too late. The malevolent entity in the form of the grandmother spoke of loneliness and asked Megan to let her in. When Megan opened the window, the malevolent entity attacked her. No one from the outside world knows what's happening in this ominous place, including the Matthews family. Tabitha, her husband Jim, and their children Ethan and Julie are traveling in a camper. Julie scares her brother with stories of monsters, but the mother assures him that there are no monsters. Upon returning home in the morning, Frank saw a crowd of people. At first he joked about it, but when the sheriff came out, the man realized that something terrible had occurred. Frank didn't follow Boyd's advice and didn't barricade the windows in his house in time. And now it's too late because Megan and Lauren are no more. Frank didn't want to believe it, but Boyd made him see the consequences of the horror that unfolded in the room. Before leaving, Boyd instructed Kenny to lock up Frank. A priest arrived to offer a prayer for Megan and Lauren. Spotting the talisman on the floor, Boyd picked it up. Meanwhile, the Matthews family continues their journey. The spouses reminisce about the past. Jim mentioned how often he thinks about how things could have turned out differently. Tabitha asked the husband to stop talking about it. Suddenly a fallen tree got in the way of the camper. The family got out of the car. Jim assumed the tree had been felled by a storm, but Tabitha thought it was odd that no one had removed it. The couple and their children felt a dreadful sense as they saw crows circling in the sky. They decided to return to the camper and take a detour. In the mysterious town, life goes on as usual. Boyd arrived at a place called the Colony. A woman named Donna reminded the sheriff that he shouldn't appear here. Boyd only wanted to visit his son Elios, who was drawing a girl named Fatima at the moment. Elios clearly wasn't pleased to see his father. Boyd told the son that it would be good if he came to Lauren and Megan's funeral today. Elios coldly replied that he was busy. Julie noticed that the phone signal was lost. Tabitha wondered why the road wasn't ending. Maybe they missed a sign. However, Jim didn't share her concerns. In the end their path led them to this strange town, where everything seemed old and frozen in time. The tires of all the vehicles were deflated. Most of the village residents had gathered to bid farewell to Lauren and Megan. The priest was giving a eulogy. Suddenly everyone's attention was drawn to the camper. The Matthews spouses in turn were also observing the town's peculiar inhabitants. Jim got out of the car to ask for directions. Boyd asked everyone not to interfere. Each of them had been through what the newcomers would be going through today. When Jim tried to ask someone for directions, everyone walked past him in silence. The only one who spoke to him was the sheriff. Jim explained the situation, saying that he and his family were lost and that there was no mobile network coverage here. Boyd advised Jim to keep driving forward without turning. So he did. Tabitha found this strange. They had been moving forward for quite a while, but they still hadn't reached the highway. The spouses were shocked when they returned to the same town they had left. Jim tried to ask a passing girl for directions, but she ignored his question. The family continued driving. Perhaps they missed a turn. Sarah sadly told her brother that this is the worst part. Each of them tried to find a way home, but they were forever trapped in this cursed place. The spouses couldn't fathom why they were going in circles. Jim began to drive more slowly to avoid missing any turns. However, this path led them back to the same town again. It seemed impossible. Jim turned back to pull onto the main road. Kenny asked the sheriff if the newcomers were ready for the truth. Boyd instructed him to bring hedgehogs. Tabitha is panicking more and more, unwilling to believe what's happening. Suddenly a car appeared ahead, which caused the accident. The camper overturned. Jim didn't lose consciousness, unlike his wife. Julie suffered minor bruises but survived, while Ethan's injuries were much more serious. The perpetrator of the accident got out of the car. It was clear that he was heavily intoxicated. Meanwhile, the sheriff and his assistant set up traps on the road to expedite the process. Suddenly they saw a staggering guy on the road who said there had been an accident. Jim desperately tried to get out but got stuck. Meanwhile, Kenny brought the guy introduced as Toby to the hospital. Nurse Gina was going to take care of Toby. A passenger woke up in the car. He was also heavily drunk and poorly aware of what was happening. Boyd came running in and asked the guy if he was hurt. The guy behaved inappropriately, so Boyd had to handcuff him to prevent him from leaving. After that, Boyd found the overturned camper on the roadside. Hearing the sheriff's voice, Jim called for help. Boyd assured that everything was under control and managed to get inside the camper. After checking Tabitha's pulse, Boyd confirmed she was alive. Seeing Ethan, Boyd realized the situation was much worse than he thought. The priest, Christy and Kenny planned to go help Boyd and convinced Elios to join them. After all, Boyd is still his father. Gina did everything to ease Toby's condition and took Kenny's father away from here. Christy and the others arrived at the scene. Christy began administering first aid to the guy introduced as Jade. The sheriff pulled Julie out of the car, promising to help her family. Of course Julie was very frightened. After checking on the situation in the camper, Kenny called out to Christy, saying things were very bad. Meanwhile, Sarah approached Toby, who had regained consciousness. She seemed kind and caring, telling Toby that he was safe here and gave him some water. Kenny and Elios helped Tabitha out of the car. She came to her senses but was still very weak. Christy told the sheriff that Ethan needed surgery, which would take at least an hour. The sunset was in about 40 minutes, so Christy and Boyd had no choice but to stay in the camper until the next morning. Christy asked Jim to step out of the camper so she wouldn't be distracted from her work. Seeing her husband, Tabitha asked where their son was. Boyd intervened in their conversation, telling them to leave for the town because it's very dangerous outside after dark. Jim and Tabitha have no intention of leaving their son, but Boyd continued to insist that they can't be here at night. Toby asked Sarah about the place. Remembering the accident, he began to panic. To calm Toby down, Sarah kissed him, and in the next moment took his life. Boyd is worried about his son, so he asks him to go back to the town with the others and take care of the family. Tabitha is disoriented and doesn't understand what's happening. When she accidentally referred to Ethan as Thomas, the husband corrected her. Remembering the past, Tabitha burst into tears. After calming down, she said she doesn't trust these people. There's something off about this place. Kenny said they needed to leave urgently. Sending the wife and daughter to the town, Jim returned to the camper to assist the doctor. Meanwhile, Boyd clenches the talisman in his hand. Soon Boyd entered the camper as well. It was already dark. Seeing the sheriff hanging the talisman by the camper window, Jim asked why that was necessary. Boyd evasively replied that he's trying to protect them. Meanwhile, the car returning to town ran over the spikes. The guys completely forgot to remove it from the road. Everyone got out of the car. Now they have only one way out, to run to the colony. But it's uncertain if the colony residents will let them in. Tabitha and Julie don't understand anything. Kenny told them to run and not look back. Meanwhile, eerie sounds started coming from outside the camper. Boyd said those creatures were coming. Looking out the window, he saw terrifying figures approaching. There was a knock. Someone outside asked if everything was okay. Jim thought it was help arriving and was about to let those people in, but Boyd stopped him, saying there were no human beings there. Kenny and the others ran to the large house. The people inside clearly weren't happy about the visitors. Fatima insisted they let them in, but some were afraid that there were monsters and human guys outside. In the end, Donna, who's in charge here, ordered the visitors to be let in. Seeing her late brother Thomas, Julie couldn't believe the reality of what was happening. Donna still doesn't trust the strangers and has ordered her men to keep an eye on them. Elios thought this was unnecessary, but he also understood that everyone had to follow the rules to survive. Jim asked Boyd and Christy who those creatures outside were. The sheriff said no one knows. The talismans are the only things that can stop the monsters. Later, Donna freed Tabitha's hands but didn't let her leave the room. Donna assured that they didn't want to harm her or Julie. Everyone in this town once experienced the same thing they're going through today. Tabitha doesn't believe the words of Donna, who tells her about the monsters. At the same time, Fatima tries to calm Julie. According to her, newcomers often act recklessly after learning the truth. No one should open the door at night, otherwise, it could end badly for everyone. Later, Fatima showed Julie drawings by Elios, who was very talented. Fatima also explained that they cover the windows at night to make it harder for those creatures to deceive them. A knock sounded in the camper again. A voice urged those inside to let in. Jim asked what would happen if the monsters got in. Boyd said there's no salvation. Weapons won't help. Only the talisman can hold back those monsters. Apparently, the creatures got onto the roof. Now everyone inside has to hold out until morning. The sheriff called for everyone to stay calm and asked Christy to focus on saving Ethan. Kenny is unhappy that the colony people didn't let them in right away. Elios is sorry, but he didn't set the rules. Gina is playing chess with Kenny's father in the basement. Every night is a trial for all of them. Sarah hears ominous voices in her head. She doesn't want to obey their orders, but she can't resist them either. Kenny is worried about his mom who's in town, as well as his father. He has already lost many skills, but he still plays chess better than anyone. The priest reassured Kenny, saying that everything will be fine. In the morning, they will return to the camper and pick up those who stayed there. But Kenny refused to go with them because he doesn't want to see more of his deceased friends. Tabitha considered Donna's story madness. But the fact remains, her family was driving forward on that endless road and returning to this town again and again. According to Donna, all those who ended up here encountered the fallen tree on the road and saw crows in the sky. Donna came to this place with her sister, who perished after encountering one of the monsters. Donna barely survived. It was over 3 years ago. Anyone who meets the monsters face to face is doomed. Christy managed to stabilize Ethan's condition. She shared that she had gone to medical school before coming here. Jim in turn shared that he worked as an engineer. When Ethan woke up, he said he saw strange drawings. He used to draw similar ones, but didn't understand their meaning. The priest walked exhausted Kenny to the room. Kenny constantly talked about his father. When his dementia set in, their family's life changed completely. In tears, Sarah told her brother that she had no choice. The voices in her head commanded her to do something terrible. Seeing Toby lifeless, Gina was horrified and dropped the tray with food. Someone let the monsters inside. Christy had a nightmare about one of the monsters breaking into the camper. When she woke up, Boyd said the sun had risen. Morning had come, and they had managed to survive. Kenny, the priest, Tabitha and Julie arrived for them. Tabitha cried upon seeing that her husband and son were okay. Sarah told her brother that she couldn't control it. She constantly hears someone else's voices that have subjected her to their will. Noticing that the hospital door was open, Kenny and the others immediately felt something was wrong. In the basement, they found the bodies of Gina, Tobe, and Kenny's father. The guy burst into tears. Of course no one suspected Sarah's involvement. Arriving at the post office building, Boyd erased the sign indicating 96 nights without incidents. It seems the worst nightmare is yet to come. The Matthews family temporarily stayed in the colony. In the final scene, we see Ethan looking out of the window in the middle of the day and seeing a boy in white. If you want the series to continue, then write about it in the comments and subscribe to our channel.